We've got Michael Moore coming up with us this hour. Also, the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell goes into effect at 1 minute past midnight tonight. And the president took a major turn today toward confrontation with congressional Republicans, threatening to veto anything Congress sends him that tries to reduce the deficit using cuts alone without making taxation more fair as well. That is all ahead over the course of this hour. But the president's political schedule these days is sort of a bifurcated thing. He has been making a lot of policy speeches about his priorities, about what the country needs and what Congress needs to get done. He has also, at the same time, been doing a lot of Democratic fundraisers recently. The president tonight, for example, speaking to a small, high-dollar fundraiser in New York City. At the end of last week, speaking to a different Democratic audience at a fundraiser, the president said this, quote, "I know that over the last couple of months there have been Democrats who voiced concerns and nervousness about, well, in this kind of economy, aren't these just huge headwinds in terms of your reelection? And I just have to remind people that here's one thing I know for certain. The odds of me being reelected are much higher than the odds of me being elected in the first place," which is a fair point. People who support President Obama's reelection or who aren't sure if they do, but who despair about the prospect of any of this year's crop of Republican candidates winning, for perspective, it is also worth remembering that in 2008, not only did Mr. Obama beat John McCain, not only did Mr. Obama win, he won hugely. He won by a nearly 8-point margin. He won by about nearly 10 million votes. His margin of victory over John McCain was 3 times the margin of victory that George W. Bush had over John Kerry in the previous election. And the map from the 2008 election makes that clear. The Republican nominees for president and vice president won their home states, of course, Alaska and Arizona, and then they got deep red, mostly low population states. And that was it. That's all they got. They got the South, minus Florida, minus North Carolina, minus Virginia. Even though John McCain did win his home state of Arizona, he was not able to translate that into victory in Nevada or in New Mexico or Colorado. Barack Obama and Joe Biden in 2008 won big. So big that even this happened.
Hey, Brian, one more thing, by the way, that I'm having fun watching. Yeah. Nebraska, too. You know, Nebraska,
they split. It's your favorite congressional.
Yep. They split their electoral votes. There is a way to follow it very easily. Omaha right here. It's 2 counties make up the entire congressional district. It is Douglas County. Obama's up a little bit. And it is Sarpy County. Obama also up. So he's got a narrow lead. We could see Nebraska for the very first time actually split its electoral votes and not have them all go in the same direction.
That is, in fact, what happened on election night 2008. See? And here's what that looked like on the map. You got all these red states and all these blue states. And then what's up with Nebraska? Nebraska is red, but with a spot. Nebraska and Maine are the only 2 states in the country where presidential candidates don't necessarily get all the electoral votes for the state. They don't win the whole state. Those states, Nebraska and Maine, hand out their electoral votes in part district by district. So even though John McCain won Nebraska overall, in the congressional district where Omaha is, Barack Obama won. And so Obama-Biden got 1 blue electoral vote there. That's the spot. Of course, the 2008 election was, as I've been saying, sort of a blowout, so that 1 electoral vote from Nebraska did not matter. That 1 blue spot in Nebraska was not a deciding thing. But in 2012, those economic headwinds President Obama was talking about to that Democratic audience last week, I mean, nobody knows for sure, but it looks like because of those economic headwinds, it may very well be a much closer election in 2012. It may be a very hard-fought election. And so that 1 Democratic electoral vote from Omaha, Nebraska, Obama was the first Democrat to win an electoral vote in Nebraska since 1964. That 1 vote may not have mattered on election night in 2008. It may have just been a curiosity that night and something that got Chuck Todd very adorably excited. But in 2012, that 1 electoral vote in Omaha, Nebraska might just matter. It might be that close. And Nebraska Republicans know that. And so Nebraska Republicans are now mobilizing to make sure that blue Omaha thing, that 1 electoral Democratic vote from Omaha, Nebraska, never happens again. And by mobilizing to make sure it never happens again, I don't mean they are redoubling their efforts to make their case to the people of Nebraska that Nebraskans should vote for Republicans and not for Democrats. That is not what I mean by mobilizing. What I mean by mobilizing is that Republicans in Nebraska are now trying to change the structure of voting in Nebraska, change the means by which Nebraska conducts its elections so that that structure will benefit the Republican Party in a partisan way. The Leadership Committee of the Republican Party in Nebraska at their meeting this weekend in Lincoln passed a resolution demanding that all Nebraska Republican legislators vote to get rid of Nebraska's current election system in favor of one that won't run the risk of giving Barack Obama even one electoral vote. Republicans in the legislature have been promoting a plan to change Nebraska into a winner-take-all system for presidential elections. And as of this weekend, here's what the Republican Party had to say to any Republican who does not vote for their party's plan. Quote, "Be it resolved that the Nebraska Republican Party will not support in any manner, financial or otherwise, any state senator who opposes the return of the state to the winner-take-all electoral vote plan, either by failing to vote for such in committee or on the floor of the legislature." So if you don't vote for us to change to winner-take-all, the Republican Party will disown you. Why is the Nebraska Republican Party playing such hardball on this? Making this a do-or-die issue for Nebraska Republicans? They must vote to change this, or... When they earlier this year, back in January, brought this up, the Republican senator who sponsored the bill to get rid of Nebraska's election system, he told the Lincoln Journal-Star, quote, "We would not want to see Obama reelected in 2012 by one electoral vote in Omaha." So the principle at work here is that changing this rule would be a way to deny President Obama an electoral vote. Changing this rule is a way to deny President Obama a shot at reelection, not by changing the way people vote or the way people feel about either candidate, but simply by changing the rules so that the rules themselves advantage the Republican Party. This is the principle at work here. You can tell that this is the principle at work for Republicans this year because they are also in the process of changing the election rules in the opposite direction in a different state. Because in that state, they've figured out a way to change the rules so that they benefit the Republican Party and hurt President Obama's chances at reelection. Pennsylvania is a state where Republicans have the opposite problem that they have in Nebraska. In Nebraska, you can pretty much count on a Republican winning the state overall, even if there are some pockets of blue. In Pennsylvania, if the last couple of decades are any guide, you can pretty much count on a Democrat winning the state overall, even though there will be pockets of red in the state. And so while Republicans are trying to create a winner-take-all system to benefit a Republican who will likely win the whole state in Nebraska, they are also at the same time trying to eliminate a winner-take-all system in Pennsylvania so that can benefit a Republican nominee there. John McCain won 10 congressional districts in Pennsylvania in 2008, even as he lost the state overall to Barack Obama. Pennsylvania Republicans right now are trying to change the rules so that another result like they had in 2008 wouldn't give Barack Obama 21 electoral votes like he got then, or 20, which is how many Pennsylvania had at the time. It has this time around. It would instead give the Republican probably as many as 12 of those electoral votes, even if that Republican candidate lost the whole state. So think about this. Think about this in big terms. 2 states. Republicans pursuing exactly opposite policies in the 2 states. Parties generally pursue policies that they ideologically agree with, that they have a principled reason for supporting. The only principle that could possibly guide opposite decisions in 2 different states is that the principle for both of them is that both policy changes, both election rule changes, will make it harder for President Obama to get reelected, structurally. But it's not just Nebraska and Pennsylvania. I mean, Nebraska and Pennsylvania are so different that nothing's ever just Nebraska and Pennsylvania. These states are never a pair. These are never the only 2 states to have done something. There is no connection between Nebraska and Pennsylvania. Where Republicans have control of the state legislature all over the country, they are, if not banking on a close presidential election in 2012, if they are not banking on it, they are at least planning for it, preparing for it, making sure that their rules are set up in such a way that the election is most likely to go for the Republican. And they are changing the rules of their elections to benefit the Republican nominee and to make it harder for President Obama to get reelected. In 32 states and in the District of Columbia right now, you can vote before Election Day. And the people who take advantage of early voting are a pretty diverse group. They can just be, highly motivated voters who just can't wait to get into the polls. They may be people who have a hard time getting off work or school to go vote, and therefore the shorter lines and the easy access of early voting make it easier for them. People vote early for all sorts of reasons. But people who vote early for whatever reason, particularly since 2008, those early voters tend to vote Democratic. Even in 2010, which was a Republican blowout, elections went red last year, up and down the ticket, coast to coast, all over the country. It was a huge Republican year in 2010. But among early voters, even that year, even in 2010, in the words of the Associated Press today, quote, Democratic voters held an edge in early voting during the 2010 elections, despite the unfavorable climate for the party nationally and the eventual Republican gains. So allowing people to vote early shortens the lines. It makes voting more accessible, and Democratic-leaning voters have been taking advantage of early voting, particularly in the past couple of election cycles. It increases voter turnout, which, generally speaking, tends to help Democratic candidates. And so now, where Republicans control legislatures this year, particularly where they control legislatures and governorships, Republicans are rolling back early voting. They are cutting down the number of days. They are cutting down the number of hours. They are cutting down the number of locations. They are making it harder to vote, shortening the